Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We'll get started in just 1 minute. Once we have everybody join us from the waiting room. Laura, did you want to go ahead and share your screen?
Oh yeah, sorry, I thought I was.
No, no problem. We can do that while we're waiting for everybody. Perfect.
Okay. You can see that?
I can.
Okay,
We're good. We'll just give like another minute because we got a lot of people streaming in here, which is great. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's NPD webinar series. Today we're focusing on soft goods and accessories. We'll get started in just 1 minute, maybe 30 more seconds once we get some more people in from the waiting room.
Okay, terrific. I'll go ahead and just talk through our setup slide, if that's okay, Maggie.
That'd be great. Thanks so much. I'll let you take it from here.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for what is now our 4th and final installment of the Retail Data 101 webinar series. So this has been a joint partnership of NPD and SIA. In order to bring those of you that may not be sure how to get started with retail data, how to uncover trends, and how to use them in your business, it's meant for those of you that have apprehension or uncertainty around that, where and how to begin using sell-through data. So this series is really meant for you to do just that. I am Laura Hills. So if you have not joined an SIA NPD webinar in the last year or two, then you're new to me and you're probably new to NPD. I'm an analyst with NPD for the specialty outdoor and snow industries. I'm also the director of client development for NPD Sports and Outdoor Division. So I work directly with SIA and also several of the industry leaders, manufacturers in the snow market. We work to, uncover and to capitalize on pertinent trends that are impacting the industry. So if you've joined us for any previous webinars to today, so the one that we did yesterday was snowboard equipment. Last week we did Nordic and Alpine touring as well as Alpine equipment. If you joined us for any of those, then the first 10 slides of today are going to be a repeat for you. So if you want to go grab a cup of coffee or get a snack and then come back, then you won't hear the repeat of what that is. And then the meat of the presentation, the data related to soft goods and apparel accessories is all new to today. With that said, if you missed any of the other previous webinars in the series, the recordings are available through SIA, and you can also reach out to me directly and I can share to you a PDF of the presentation if any of that is of interest to you. So as I said, the webinar I have for you today is a partnership of NPD and SIA. It's intended to be that educational extension of what we show as the total industry trends. I deliver those as webinars with Julia Day, both ahead of, during, and then at the end of each snow season. So if you've captured those, some of these slides will look familiar to you. And we can talk about how you might take that data and employ it in your business. So this will, then it goes a little step further because we have a little bit more time to look specifically at soft goods. We'll give a little bit more intimate analysis of apparel and headwear and handwear. And then certainly we'll outline where that data comes from, how you should read it, and then most importantly, what parties of your organization should be using that data to make decisions. So the structure of this is really an illustration of some of those baby steps in analysis and to show you where and how to begin. If after today's webinar or after the ones that you've gone back and reviewed from the other categories, you don't feel comfortable in beginning to use the data, please reach out to me and let me know. I'm happy to talk through that with you, and certainly SIA can be a strong resource for you as well. So after we go through, the pertinent examples of case uses for data, then I'll talk you through some of the other data sources that you have as a member of SIA and how you might marry those all together, to glean even greater insights and impact from the, resources that you have at your disposal. And then lastly, I'll showcase for you today the reports that you have access to through your membership with SIA, and I'll leave time at the end to answer any questions that anyone has. If you do have questions along the way, you can plug those into the Q&A, and together Maggie and I will try to address those as they come up if it's feasible, and then if not, certainly at the end we can address any that have been submitted that maybe I didn't address throughout the presentation. So if you haven't joined us before and you don't know much about NPD or you haven't heard of us, we truly are a global organization operating in 19 countries and across 20 industries. Our data is considered the data of record by the industries that we track, and we've been working with the world's leading brands and retailers for over 50 years. And because our expertise crosses 20 industries, we're able to talk to you not just about the in-depth granular analysis of your key categories like we are today, but we can also look up and across industries and talk about what we're seeing from a macro trend perspective at total retail, and give you that higher level perspective. If you haven't before, please be sure to check out NPD's website. There's a wealth of press releases and studies that you can glean a tremendous amount of insight from, especially as it pertains to impacts from COVID. And then specifically in the sports business, which is where I operate within NPD, we cover everything from athletics to cycling to total snow business, from top to the bottom of the mountain. So with this, I'm able to offer you a full perspective of what's happening, not just in the snow industry, but how that plays into the greater sports market performance at retail as well. And so the question of the day is why should you use data? Why do you need it? If you haven't been using it thus far, you're getting along maybe okay. So what makes us say that it's actually critical to your business? And so first and foremost, data is the unbiased input to your decision making. It's certain that you make numerous decisions throughout your day, in your life, in your personal life, in your business, based on your expertise on your business, and your knowledge of your categories, and just your good old gut and intuition. But data offers you the facts that will justify your feelings as to what's happening in the market and where it's going to go. It's the analytics that will give weight to those anecdotes that you are seeing in the market and hearing. And then you can use that data to validate your feelings, bring clarity, and ensure that your judgment on those decisions isn't being clouded by other factors. Then secondly, it's also the great equalizer. So it levels the playing field, across all companies. It gives an opportunity for competitive advantage. In an industry that's led by data, certainly we see all ships go up. And then one point I hear all the time from buying and commercial teams is that data and NPD data is one language at the buying table. It's one language for you to speak about the truth that's happening in the industry, and it really becomes a foundation for those productive buying and selling conversations. What I'm also hearing more and more is that this is an expectation of buyers, and that their sales reps come prepared with recommendations that are based in data, so that the direction of the business can go the right way and be profitable for both partners involved. So no doubt, COVID sort of fast forwarded the retail timeline for change, and certainly we're seeing the resale landscape for both manufacturers and retailers, fast forward and change very rapidly. So you need to innovate and to become even more savvy than you were previous. So there's a myriad of ways that you can do this, leveraging data in your business and in operations, so that you're aware of those changes as they are happening in the market, and you can plan for those as you move forward. And then here's an example of some of the common questions that we hear from folks in the market, and where we can apply the data to answer them. So I'll use some of these as examples within the data that I have for you today, but some of the simplest are, what's the size of my market? Is it growing or is it shrinking? Is my category shifting towards value or premium product offerings? Do I have the right distribution for my product? Is my channel strategy aligned with the market growth and direction? And then for those of you on the manufacturer side, my brand's growing. I can see that in my sell-in numbers, and I hear good feedback, but am I gaining share of the market? So if I'm growing, what are my competitors doing? Am I not growing as fast, or am I outpacing the market? So am I gaining share, or am I losing it based on what the market's doing? And then lastly, where to prioritize your open to buy. So as a buyer and as a retailer, you might know your categories very, very well, and you see what's doing well, but is there a new product offering? Is there a new category? Is there a new brand entrant into the mix that maybe you haven't assorted before, and so you don't know that they're getting a lot of traction and that they're doing very, very well where they're selling? And the sell-through, the wholesale sell-through data can expose that for you. Okay, so jumping into the data. The first and most macro and most basic analysis I have for you is that total market sizing and trend question. So this addresses, what is the size of the prize and is it growing or shrinking? The total snow industry for the 1920 season, it represented a $6.5 billion business. It contracted 4% in dollars, 5% in units, and added about 1% in the total industry average selling price. So apparel, which is what we're here to talk about today, is far and away the largest category by volume. And it really struggled to match the performance that we saw in the 18-19 season. Accessories all the way to the right also fell compared with last season, but equipment right there in the middle, the hard goods piece of the business that we've been analyzing for the first 3 segments of this webinar, it fared much better, and it posted overall flat performance to last year, as well as having growth the year previous. So equipment was the brighter piece of the market in this past season, and apparel just wasn't able to match the really great season that we had the year prior. So we'll talk about some of the dynamics behind that as we dive deeper. The next step down from sizing and tracking your total industry or total category sell-through is to analyze the size and performance of the individual channels of business within the industry. So how does your channel strategy align with the performance and direction of the industry? Are you applying the right resources to the right key partnerships in the key markets where growth is taking place? From the retailer side, how are you performing against the market? How are you performing against like retailers within the business? And are there other channels of the industry where growth might be taking place that you could adopt some of those habits from? So here's how NPD segments the channels of business within the snow sports industry. We have Snow Chain on the left. This is our full participating list of retailers, as well as the grayed out text, which is the retailers that we are projecting for. So we feel we have a strong understanding of those retailers' assortment and of their business. And so we project this data set up to what we believe the total market to be, inclusive of those retailers. But everyone on the left-hand side is submitting their real sell-through data from their POS system for all stores to us. The only caveat there is that REI's brick and mortar business sits in Snow Chain, and their e-com business sits all the way to the right in Snow Internet. So I'll address that in further detail in just a minute. In the center, we have the snow specialty retailers. This is an example set of the retailers that get bucketed into this channel. So it's neither a full nor complete nor a certain list these are the retailers involved in our panel, but it's meant to give you an indication of the types of retailers that sit in this space. That list is very long and extensive, and we also sign confidentiality agreements with those retailers so as not to report them out within a reporting retailer list. And then lastly, on the end, Snow Internet, you can see that these are more of your pure .com retailers. So examples are, the Backcountry, the Evo, the Moose Jaws of the world. And then, as I said, REI's .com business sits in this channel. It is the only snow chain dealer whose .com business is broken out separately. So for the rest of the retailers within the snow chain, that encompasses their brick and mortar and their internet business. So that's a really important understanding to have as we move through and we talk about what's happening in the snow industry, because we'll look at it in a lot of ways and talk about what the influence of the different channels have on the total industry performance. So stepping down from that total market and into channel size and performance, we see that Snow Specialty is the largest channel within the industry. It's trended down faster in units than it has in dollars. So on the left, we have dollars sold by channel in descending order, Snow Specialty being there at the top. And then on the right, we have what the percent change is for this past 2019-2020 season versus what happened in the 2018-2019 season. So how that affected dollars and then stacked dollars on top of units. So for Snow Specialty, we saw a 5% decline in dollars and a 6% decline in units. Snow Chain sits in the middle by volume. It also saw the deepest decline in units or a deeper decline in units than in dollars. And then Snow Internet down at the bottom. Now still the smallest channel by volume, but I have to tell you that as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm also an analyst for not just the snow industry, but the outdoor industry. And for the total outdoor industry, for the first time, we've seen the internet, Sports Specialty internet channel actually eclipse the size of the outdoor specialty channel across all categories. So apparel, equipment, accessories, and footwear. So that's just interesting to note that there's been a significant amount of growth taking place in that channel outside of the snow industry. But if we look at the performance of the snow internet for specifically snow industry for this past year, we see that it declined along with the rest of the channels of the business in our space. So 4% decline in dollars and 3% decline in units. So these are just the single season views of the channels, how valuable they are to the total industry and what their performance was. It's also important to look at multi-year trends as well to understand how your key category performance sits within those, and then also what potential influences it has on total channel performance. Additionally, several of the categories within snow business are cyclical, right? They have a replacement cycle. They tend to be higher ASP items. And so what happened this year is indicative of that replacement cycle, but then also very indicative of what happened with weather. It can be one of the strongest influences on our business. So it's really important to understand how this year's performance fits in with the past season's trends as well. So on this slide, I'm charting for you first total channel performance labeled with percent changes for the last 2 years worth of trend. So the previous slide was sizing the channels and showing what happened for dollars versus units, that it was a pretty consistent decline, on both measures for this past season. Now we're just going to look at what dollars percent change was for the last season, this past season, the 1920 season is there on the end. And then tucked inside that is what the percent change was for the previous season, 1819. So we see that, ranked by volume, Snow Specialty, as I said, was at the top. On the previous slide, we saw that it fell 5% for last season, but it actually grew 5% the season prior. So what it added 2 seasons ago is essentially been wiped away from this past season. Snow Chain is the next largest due to volume of soft goods that happen in that space, and it too lost this past season essentially what it had gained in the season prior. So it fell 3% but previous year it had actually grown 5%, so slightly more. And then lastly, the snow internet, it actually trended the faster than the other two channels this past season, which is, some of what we've seen out of e-commerce kind of across all industries. But it wasn't insulated from the decline that we saw within kind of the total industry. So counter to several other industries in the US, internet business in snow was not a booming segment going into the pandemic. And we'll talk about what impacts the store closures had on it in March, specifically on the next slide. So the decline in snow specialty that we saw this season and the growth that it enjoyed 2 seasons ago was very heavily influenced by the performance of apparel, soft goods, and within that outerwear, total outerwear. Weather and trend cycles, as I mentioned, combined in the 18-19 season, and it drove considerable growth within soft goods space that was enjoyed kind of across the board, all segments, and across a lot of brands. But we didn't have either of those factors to the same extent this past season. So the category really suffered declines. And because of the volume that it represents to the total industry across all channels, so did the channel performances. Snow chain and snow internet, the same was true there. Both grew alongside apparel and outerwear in the 18-19 season, and then similarly they fell in the 19-20 season. So on the left-hand side, you can see by channel what apparel represents to the snow specialty channel, and then outerwear sits within apparel. So outerwear as a percentage, or rather as the total volume that goes into that $1.2 billion apparel market in snow specialty, and then similarly broken out for each of the other channels. And again, there'll be a recording of this presentation. So if you want to sit with any of these numbers a little bit longer, you can go back and review the recording, or you can reach out to me and ask for a PDF of the presentation. And I'm happy to share that to you as well, so you have these for reference. So when we look specifically at channel performance within the month of March, the trends are very much in line with what we know to be true of the greater US market. Brick and mortar heavy businesses like snow specialty were hit the hardest. Chain businesses suffered significant losses too, because while some of them were able to remain open, many were shuttered for a period of time. And then the traffic shifted from in-store purchasing to online buying. However, at a channel level, snow internet still registered a slight decline in dollars sold, despite a 10% growth in units due to a falling average selling price. And then it's really interesting to look at the category performances in the March internet period, because what was true for the total industry in soft goods was vastly different from what I've been talking to and speaking to for hard goods, and where that story was much more positive for snowboard equipment, for AT and Nordic certainly, and then also for alpine equipment. All of those hard goods categories, as I said, trended positively for the season, and then going into March for internet, a lot of consumers were still looking to get those goods, especially the hard goods that allowed participants to get into the backcountry. So any of your backcountry accessories or your alpine touring gear, all of that saw tremendous growth in internet sales in March. But if we take a look at the total industry here, we see that it fell 1% in dollars sold. It actually grew 10% in units, with an ASP decline of 9%. Apparel followed in line with that, so falling 7% in dollars sold. We saw a jump in 9% in units sold, and then a much steeper decline in average selling price, a decline of 15%. Outerwear within that being challenged throughout the season, it's no surprise that when stores closed, that business didn't pick up within online in March. So double digits decline in dollars sold at 11%. Units fell just 2%, and then ASP was down another 9%. The interesting part about this is headwear. So when you look at the headwear category, you see outstanding performance, right? So 138% in dollars sold, 148% in units, and then a 4% change in the average selling price. You'll immediately understand why when I tell you that headwear includes net gaiter sales. So those certainly took off as, you know, people were looking for masks or alternative to masks that were more comfortable and able to be worn. So we very much gravitated toward neck gaiters, and that drove the increases that we saw in headwear. So with a relatively lower ASP out of you know, the category of headwear and with neck gaiters compared to like your outerwear, significant growth in units are in here are what certainly drove that total apparel percent change in ASP down even greater. So that's why we see the double-digit 15% decline in ASP. Even though headwear also had a decline in ASP, so many units being sold at that lower price is certainly what drove the overall ASP for the total apparel category down. And then handwear, with everything closed and everyone, you know, except the backcountry enthusiasts were pretty much, you know, everyone except them were pretty much staying home. There were fewer chances of A, losing the match to your existing pair of gloves or mittens, and B, fewer reminders if you had already lost it that you needed to replace it. So fewer opportunities for reminders as everyone was kind of, you know, sequestered at home. So that category saw the deepest declines. It fell 20% in dollars sold for the month, and then 9% in units and down 13% in ASP. So NPD doesn't track snow sales in the summer months of April through July because those sales are so minimal in each of those selling months. We stopped tracking the industry, and then we pick back up in August. So we know from other industries that even though stores open back up, the consumers continue to purchase goods from e-commerce at a higher rate than they did prior to COVID. So with apparel and accessories, however, these are two categories that certainly have been the hardest hit by the pandemic and by store closures. And as we saw here, outside of masks, these categories also, you know, weren't benefiting from the shift to e-com. So it'll be really interesting to see what these trends look like as we move into the early months of the 2021 season. So as we've already seen, total apparel was challenged this past season, and business only worsened with the pandemic. If we look at each of the categories within apparel, we know that outerwear is by far the largest and most influential. It declined along with all other apparel and accessories categories, with the exception of the second bar there, which is sportswear. The sportswear segment ended the season up 15%. And this was primarily attributed to sweatshirts growth that really took place throughout the season. That's a trend that's been happening actually for some time and continued to happen through this season. When the pandemic and the stay-at-home orders hit in early March, it brought about a renewed focus on health and wellness and outdoor activities like running and hiking and camping. And this really bolstered the sportswear category even further in segments like active bottoms and sports bras. So because even in snow retail, sportswear is a much less specific category to the end use than other apparel categories, I think we can expect to see this category growth continue as we move into the 2021 season. Based on the trends this summer and other NPD services, those active sportswear categories are the ones that are outperforming the apparel market overall. So the sportswear growth that we saw in sweatshirts, you know, is this something that you should take into account into your distribution strategy and into your assortment planning? When we look at what's driving the growth in sweatshirts, we saw that it ran across all wearer groups. So it's men's, women's, and youth that are driving this trend. And the vast majority of it is happening within the chain channel of business. It's happening within the chain channel of business, and it's being driven actually by more athletic brands than necessarily snow-centric brands. So Nike, Champion are two of the front runners, but then also the North Face. So it's not strictly athletic. it does include some outdoor and snow influence there. However, in snow specialty and snow internet, it was Patagonia that's driving the majority of the increases that we saw. So this is why it's so important to analyze all aspects of a trend that might be catching your attention at the category level. There's a lot of volume driven by athletic brands in the snow chain channel of retailers, as we know. So what might be happening on the surface at an industry level could be intriguing, but when we examine it more closely, it may or may not really be relevant to your business. However, if athletic hoodies aren't in your wheelhouse, then on the right-hand side there, lifestyle fleece in snow specialty and snow internet channels might fit you better. So whether you're on the retailer or the manufacturer side of the business, if that's the case, then you want to further analyze what's driving this, whether it's any specific wearer driver in snow specialty or snow internet separately. What are the key attributes? So, quarter snaps or half zips or full zips, what's the driver behind some of the trends for those key items? And then also sweet spots in terms of price point could be very valuable to look at for buyers and for merchandisers, and then also for your product development and your demand planning teams. So when every outerwear type contributes to the decline of outerwear business for the season, you can often make two macro assumptions. It was both an off year in the replacement cycle, as I said, for a majority of consumers, and there was no real weather to drive additional purchase trips or purchase decisions. So looking specifically at outerwear tops business in this table, I show you that the separate performances of insulated jackets versus fleece, hard shell, and soft shell. So when we analyze it this way, we can see that insulated makes up over half the dollars sold in outerwear. Again, without weather, we didn't see a lot driving the sales of that. But in terms of dollars lost to the season, so we have dollars sold, dollar share, share of decline, dollars percent change, and units percent change. So the two most important ones to look at are there in the middle. Dollar share, so what does that segment represent to total outerwear? And then share of decline, how much did it contribute to the dollar decline that we saw in outerwear this season? And so for insulated, the styles there account for 62% of the dollar share, but they constituted only 38% of the decline. Whereas fleece, which makes up just 21% of the dollars sold, actually slightly over-indexed in decline at 24% share. So fleece suffered even a little bit more in outerwear than insulated did. And then non-insulated shells, they actually saw the biggest disconnect between share of dollars and share of loss. This segment represents 14% of the dollars sold in outerwear, but it accounted for 31% of the lost sales. So this was also the only segment where units fell faster than dollars, and that was due to an increase in average selling price. So there's something really interesting happening here when we just look at these numbers, and it's worth exploring a little bit further. One way to peel back that layer and better understand what's taking place in the category is to look at what's happening at the brand level within a category that interests you or that you're playing in. You may or may not have access to brand and item level information as a retailer or as a manufacturer in your organization. If you don't and you want to take your analysis further and be a little bit more sophisticated with it, reach out to me and I can certainly put you in contact with the right person at NPD to engage you in that conversation. So looking at what's happening at the brand level here, because all outerwear types were contributing to the total outerwear declines, one might suspect that most top brands among those segments were also sharing in those losses. However, looking at the brand performance, this is really not the case in non-insulated shells. And when we chart units sold percent change against the average selling price, we can quickly answer that question as to whether the category, the question from the beginning before we started, is my category shifting towards value or towards premium product offerings? So what you see here is that I've charted for you the top 5 brands by dollar volume in non-insulated outerwear. So Patagonia is the farthest on the left. They represent the #1 selling brand in non-insulated outerwear, followed by private label. Then you have Arc'teryx, the North Face, and Columbia. And for those of you that aren't familiar with looking at wholesale sell-through data, private label for us represents a bucket of multiple in-house brands for the retailers in our reporting set. So this is a roll-up of all of those in-house brands and is not representing any one single private brand. It's all of them together. So that's why it's such a big bucket. So the columns above each brand, they represent the average selling price in non-insulated outerwear. And then I've overlaid that with the percent change in units sold of the brand in non-insulated outerwear. So what we see from the start here is that Patagonia and Arc'teryx are the two highest ASP brands in the segment. And they're also the only brands within the top 5 to post an increase in percent change of dollars sold. There in the center, Arc'teryx at $339 average selling price. Arc'teryx alone has a significantly higher ASP than the segment average, which is $80. And they're posting double-digit growth in units sold, while the category as a whole is being driven down pretty significantly by those double-digit declines that you're seeing above private label, the North Face, and Columbia. So yeah, one of the interesting things to point out here that's not charted is the volume of units sold. So for instance, private label far and away drives the most units in this segment, actually 7.5 times more than Arc'teryx. But Arc'teryx ASP at $339 is in turn 7.5 times higher than the average of private label. So from an assortment and a merchandising standpoint, you certainly don't want to miss this Arc'teryx customer by not assorting this higher price point option in your offering. But especially since further analysis of the brand would show you that they have a tremendous amount of brand momentum taking place right now. They have for several years, and this is really their bread and butter category, the bread and butter segment rather. So conversely, if you're a manufacturer doing further competitive analysis, you'll find that Arc'teryx is really owning much of the growth in all price segments above 300 in this space. So if you're a brand that has price permission to play in those buckets, do you have the right product position to compete with them? Within NPD data, we have the ability to analyze down to the technology of the fabric and the items that are selling in this space. So you can really get a firm understanding of what attributes, top selling items are employing to drive some of the sales that are taking place here. And then while we're able to identify, brand trends in non-insulated at a total industry by looking at it that way, taking the analysis down another level and layering in the channel dynamics that are taking place in outerwear types is another way to answer the question around value premium shifts and also to guide your assortment strategies or product development and product placement plans. So first in insulated chops, looking at dollar share point change, top brands and channels, we see that Patagonia drove a significant amount of the growth took a significant amount of share within the chain channel and then also within the internet channel. Arc'teryx was trending fast in the internet channel, while Obermeyer, a very specialty-centric brand, saw their gains take place in the snow specialty channel. And then in fleece tops, it's really important to pay attention to private label and what's taking place in the chain channel. They're garnering a lot of dollar share there. And then Arc'teryx is the brand to look at in specialty and internet together. And then Patagonia, actually looking at dollar share point change between the two channels, had the highest of the specialty brands outside of private label. And then non-insulated tops there at the end, we just looked at this, from a total industry perspective, but looking down to what's taking place by channel. All of Arc'teryx's gains are coming from specialty and from internet. The business is not happening there in chain. Patagonia is seeing immense gains there in the internet channel. So in terms of the top brands that were growing, it was taking place there in specialty and internet. We do see growth out of the North Face in the chain channel, share point change growth here, dollar share point change. despite some of the unit declines that we saw at the total level. And then Mountain Hardwear, also a very specialty centric brand, is seeing some gains in non-insulated shells there in the snow specialty channel. So the time is going fast, and I've walked you now through several examples of, really baby step ways to start to leverage NPD sell-through data at sort of the macro industry and channel levels, as well as down to some brand and item and average selling price analysis. We can certainly, get more sophisticated this and take it a little bit further, but this at least should give you a place to get your feet wet and to feel comfortable taking some of this data and using it in your business. What you can do to make NPD data even more powerful and actionable is to take the insights that you get from it and combine it with some of these other data sources that you have access to as a member of SIA. If you go to the insights page of the website, you can see that there's consumer research, you have participation studies, as well as sell-in data that can then be married to the sell-through data for really the most holistic view of what's taking place in the market and what trends are happening there. Okay, so the specific reports that you have access to as an apparel person in an SIA member are twofold. So the first is a top line industry view. It's called a total outerwear report. I'm gonna switch to that and show you what that looks like now. So here's that report that was screenshotted on the slide. I'm gonna walk you through what this report includes in it so that you know what to expect in the coming season that you can get access to. And you also have a little bit of familiarity with the components of the report so you can open it and feel comfortable using it. So the first tab is just the title page. It's gonna tell you the report date. These reports are reported at dates as the actual data month that it's inclusive of. So this is inclusive of data through March 2020. So that was the last data month of the season, the 1920 season. The table of contents, everything here is hot linked, so you can use this as a way to jump to any particular piece of the report. And then as we move through, you have an all channel summary here. This is going to give you what's taking place at a total industry level. So this is representative of snow chain, snow internet, and snow specialty all together. So you can see overall at a total industry level for the month of March, unit sales and dollar sales were down across the board in all segments of apparel. So you can see your shell tops, your soft shell tops, your insulated, and your fleece, as well as all the bottom components of outerwear business. And then you also get season to date roll up for all channel summary here as well. So you can see dollar volume, units percent change, and dollars percent change, and then the indicator up or down of what took place. And then moving along, you have a more detailed dollar analysis for total outerwear, broken out by months in the selling season. So you can see what each month this season versus the last 3 seasons contributed to the total industry volume and how important that month was or has become. And then you can also see it broken by channel over here to the left, and then the breakout of tops, bottoms, and suits and sets over here to the right. That same format of analysis is done for units. And then you move over to another all channels top line. So you have an all channel summary, and then you have an all channels top line. So this breaks out your adult business versus juniors business for outerwear. You can also see units sold, dollars sold, and average selling price separately. Current period is going to be the month that we're reporting in. So current period is March. Here's your units sold, and then season to date. Here's your units sold, and then CP with the delta is current period percent change, and then season to date percent change. So current period units sold were down, 37%, and season to date they were down 11%. So that's how you read that. Same setup and format for dollar sold and average retail. And then that same format is broken out for the 3 individual channels within the industry. So this is how you get that drill down to channel analysis. First for specialty, so here's your snow specialty. Jumping over that next tab, you have your chain, same top line report, and then your snow internet top line, the same exact format. And then specialty regional analysis. Regional analysis is only available from our snow specialty channel. So alongside the specialty top line, then you have a breakout of what the regional, the 4 census regions contributed to the total US performance, so the total industry performance. So that's your total outerwear report. There's another report that you're going to get access to as SIA members on a monthly basis as we move throughout the season. August and September data months are published together. If you're obviously near enough to the market, you know that there's a lot of clearance activity that takes place in August, particularly for hard goods, but also for soft goods, as retailers are switching over from maybe patio furniture to ski gear. You know, they're bringing stuff out of inventory that got packed away at the end of last season, and typically those are done as clearance sales. So a lot of the August business is clearance of old inventory, and then we begin, you know, September, and so we report those 2 months together. That'll deliver in mid-November, so that's going to be the start of the season. This report is dated with the date that, or with the month that it's delivered. So this says updated May 2020. That was when our March 2020 data delivered. So it's March data month is what this data is representative of through season to date. And so the next delivery of this will say updated November 2020, and it'll be inclusive of August and September selling months. This is a much more overarching and all-encompassing report that you have access to. So it's not just related to outerwear. It'll allow you to see some components of apparel and accessories, handwear, headwear, things of that nature, and what, you know, performances and trends took place in those categories that are maybe most relevant to you. But it'll also allow you to see how that fits into the total industry performance for dollars, units, and average selling price, and by channel. So a lot of data included into just one report here. It's super powerful. The table of contents, again, is hot linked to the rest of the report. So if you know where you want to go and you want to jump to it, you can do it there. If you want an understanding or overview of who we are as NPD, what we track, and then how we bring our data to market, so our POS data methodology is outlined there. You have, again, the retailers by channel overview that I included at the start of this presentation. It's always good to have that on hand and as a reference. And then channel definitions, why we put certain retailers where, your full category hierarchy and category definitions. So a lot of nitty-gritty detail about why we put the data in the format that we do. And then these blue tabs are the actual data tabs that you want to be aware of. So we have a current period, so the data month that's most recent or that's delivered with this file is the current period. You can slice it by gender, or you can do season to date by gender. So certainly for apparel, this is a very important tab to have. You also have a roll-up of all genders together, so current period and season to date. So let's look specifically at season to date. This is going to be the most overarching. In terms of channels up here at the top, all are included in this, but you can also slice down to each one. So if you want to just look specifically at what took place in the snow specialty channel, you can filter down to that. And then you can break out the sales from there. So we have at the super category level, accessories, apparel, and equipment. Apparel being most relevant to the group today. You can see if you expand that out, you'll get the full hierarchy of what we have in the apparel category available to you. So you can look at what handwear, headwear did for the full season to date, dollars, units, average selling price, and then that percent change. Cold weather undergarments are included in here. We have total outerwear, and then you have the ability to look at it by tops, suits, and bottoms. And then socks, And lastly, sportswear. Sportswear, again, being, you know, the best performing category within apparel for all channels combined. So great detail there. You can also, as I said, break this out to see how performance shaped up for the rest of the industry. So what was taking place in equipment, and you know, what influence or you know, impact did that have on apparel, or vice versa. And then lastly, you can look at that same structure season to date by the specialty region. So again, weather being so important to our business and weather changing so dramatically by region, it can be really important to look at what that business looked like across the board. So if you don't have snow and cold, then you're oftentimes not seeing the driving force of purchasing for outerwear and for your handwear and your headwear. So you can see when we look at the regional performances, you know, how each region performed in that period, and then also what it contributed to the total performance overall. So a lot of great data in this file here, very robust and overarching. So note to look for that from SIA. Those are your two reports in soft goods that you'll have access to on an ongoing basis, delivered monthly. So I'm taking it all the way to like the last few minutes here. So thanks for everybody that hung on the line. If you have any questions about the data that I showed today, or ways to, you know, take it even further, or how we structure it, it doesn't look like any questions came in while I was talking. So I'll give it another, you know, 20, 30 seconds to see if anybody has any questions to submit. Otherwise, here's my email address. If you don't feel comfortable in the open setting of asking a question, you can always shoot me an email and we can have a dialogue that way. Additionally, if you do want to go beyond the category level information and you want to dive down into brand and item level analysis, reach out to me and I'll put you in contact with the right folks at NPD, whether you're a retailer and you want to participate and get access to that lower level data, or you're a manufacturer and you don't currently have access to it now. Maggie?
Well, thank you so much, Laura. I haven't seen any other questions come in yet. So as Laura said, please feel free to reach out to either her or any of us at SIA and we'll get you the information that you need. But thank you for joining us today and we'll see everybody online soon. Thanks again, Laura.
Thanks, Maggie. Have a great day, everybody.